going on, guys? Welcome back to my F122 MyTeam career mode, and we are coming off a difficult weekend in Singapore where we really struggled to get a handle on the tight, twisty street circuits. But now we head to Japan and head to the Suzuka circuit as they're setting a new rival in Daniel Ricciardo there. We're also going to be renewing another sponsorship, and yeah, we're excited to hopefully bounce back as best we can after a very disappointing weekend in Singapore. But we kind of knew we were going to struggle, and so we're trying not to hold on to it too tightly with that result. So we are setting our R&D here, trying to find as many major upgrades that we can make to try and make as many big pushes up the R&D scale as we can. Trying to make sure we always have everything going at maximum as much as we can here, as we are continuing to try and increase the performance of our car as best we can. But nonetheless, we are heading to another permanent circuit, which I think is definitely something that fits our car's style a lot more than the street circuits like we saw in last week's race. So we are excited to get going here. We're going to do our Pirelli hot lap, try and get a little bit of extra cash for free here, as well as some free acclaim. Now, this is just the time trial, so we are not going to subject you to this as much, but we are definitely going to be trying to get around these last few corners, this tight chicane here, in about 10 seconds. Hopefully we'll be able to do it, but as the time slowly ticks up, it does not appear that we're going to be able to get the gold here. But nonetheless, we will take silver here very happily. A little bit of money and a little bit of acclaim never hurt nobody. And nonetheless, I was too excited to get into the race weekend to try this again. So we'll move forward here into Q1 here. Very overcast Suzuka circuit, trying to do the best we can here. We currently sit in P17, trying to chase the 116.8 of Sebastian Vettel. Trying to do the best we can here. We find ourselves about a half a second up on our previous best time, thankfully, and we are having a pretty decent second sector here as we continue to move forward, trying to set the best time as possible. We actually find ourselves well up on Sebastian Vettel's 1:34.3 lap time here, and we will find ourselves well up on our previous best here as we're nearing over 3/4 of a second up. And we will cross the line and actually move all the way up into P8 here on our last lap here. We'll fall all the way to P12, but nonetheless, we make it through to Q2. Definitely a good one for us. Unfortunately, Oscar finishes P20. Unfortunately, not able to really move up that much. We're definitely going to be keeping an eye on him going forward here as we near the end of the season. But we're hoping to see him start to push up the leaderboard sooner rather than later. But here we are in Q2, setting our good lap here, trying to do the best we can to try and make it out of Q2, unlike we did last week where we really struggled. We are definitely finding ourselves with more success here around Suzuka. Something I'll point out as well here is that we are dealing with a bit of a power loss issue as our power unit is starting to get a little worn. Nothing to worry about too much, but nonetheless, it's something to keep an eye on, especially as we continue around the Suzuka street circuit here. So nonetheless, we will round our final couple of corners, trying to improve as best we can, setting a good time, taking a nice tight line here, and we will cross the line in P7. And unfortunately, we were unable to improve, so we finish up Q2 in P12. It's where we'll start tomorrow. We'll move forward to our formation lap. Like I mentioned in the last episode, the game audio for these recordings were corrupted and lost. So we are just jumping straight forward to all of the action, getting into it nice and quick. So it was really a shame there that our last lap in Q2 just didn't really improve us too much. But P12 is a pretty solid result for us, and we will definitely try and make the most of it on race day. So as we come around our formation lap, we're just focusing on getting a good clean start, try not to wear out our tires too quickly, which we are definitely want to do sometimes. We actually ended up moving forward a handful of positions as well thanks to some grid penalties. And so even if we finish P12 in qualifying, we end up moving up into the top 10 thanks to some grid penalties from those around us. And so we're definitely trying to take advantage as best we can. and hoping to make some nice clean moves here at the start of the race. So as the formation lap comes to a close, we will head to the 5 red lights here in Japan. Preparing as best we can. The lights are out and we are away here in Japan around Suzuka. Valtteri Bottas gets a bit of a slow start, but so do we, unfortunately. We'll try to take a peek up the inside. We think about making a move. We hesitate just a little too much, and it really costs us a lot of momentum and time. Thankfully, we don't lose out to make Schumacher behind, and we hold on to P7 here, trying to catch back up to the pack as best we can here. We're running a bit wide, a little understeery. Our car's been extra understeery recently, and we've been really trying to figure out exactly why. But nonetheless, thankfully, since it is the first lap and there's no DRS yet, we will have the opportunity to catch back up to this group, as we will use a bit of ERS to try and catch up back and try and keep tabs on this front group. That hesitation and going into turn 1 is really something we couldn't afford to make, and we are definitely going to be trying to make up for it as best we can here. Thankfully, get a little squirrely outside of the slow hairpin, and we really squandered our opportunity to kind of hold on to the back of the pack here as we get a little too squirrely and really compromise our exit here. Thankfully, once again, we do not lose out to Mick Schumacher behind, who probably had to do some bit of avoiding action to avoid us getting a little too out of whack. And as we're making our way back down the back straight here, we are holding off the Haas, kind of closing the door a little bit on that fast left-hander. And we actually see the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz behind as well. It'll be interesting to see how long he ends up sitting back there as we come home to finish our first lap here in Suzuka. Thankfully, I think Mick and Carlos end up fighting a little bit, and actually they end up creating a nice big buffer for us ahead. Unfortunately, we do fall into a bit of a bubble on our own as we aren't really connected to the group ahead, but a little too far from those behind. As we move forward here to lap 5, we find ourselves behind the Alfa Romeo Valtteri Bottas as well, still in P7. But we can see that Carlos Sainz is now nowhere to be found, is replaced by George Russell in the Mercedes. But we do have a nice almost 4-second gap behind to the Haas. And so we are looking at this as an opportunity to try and continue to pull away and create that separation that will really allow us to settle into the top 10 here and hopefully get some solid points as we send one up the inside on this tight right-hand chicane here, the interest of the chicane on this back, these last couple of corners, and we end up making the move on the Alfa Romeo, and we move up into P6 here. We actually do get DRS off of Bottas, thankfully, since that detection zone is so far back before the chicane. So a bit of an unorthodox place to make that move, I think, but nonetheless, we get the move done, and we now move up into P6, but don't believe for a second that Valtteri is going to give up that easily as we continue to make our way through these medium speed corners here in the first sector of Suzuka, trying to do our best to not wear out our tires too much, as well as not make any major mistakes as we did on that first opening lap. And so, but nonetheless, as I mentioned, not making mistakes, we run very wide out of that fast right-hander and end up in the gravel, really compromising our speed there as they head to the very slow left-hand hairpin, getting out thankfully a little cleaner than we did on the opening lap, but nonetheless we are opening up in quite a nice little bubble behind. Not that it will last forever, but unfortunately we are still losing time to the group ahead. So I think here I got caught up a little too much in trying to pay attention to what Valtteri was doing behind and not focusing enough on running in clean air and trying to make the most out of the now clean air we had ahead. We had reports that it might rain at some point in this one, so I was definitely trying to keep on top of the rain as best as possible. But nonetheless, we will continue to run here in P6 and trying to make the most of the situation. As you can see, some raindrops start to actually show up on the camera here. Definitely something to keep an eye on as we continue to move forward. So as we move forward here to lap 12, we find ourselves continuing to run here in P6, a nice little bubble behind with the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz reappearing on our leaderboard there on the left, kind of starting to catch up to Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. And we find ourselves in a very big bubble here with less than 2 seconds behind to the Alfa Romeo, but almost a full 10-second gap to the group ahead. And so at this point, we are fighting for P6 here, trying to do the best we can to hold on as best we can, trying to run in clean air smoothly without losing too much time in any given corner. This is definitely something we need to continue to grow on as a driver, as well as a team. As you can see there, that our medium tires are starting to really go off, well over 50% worn. And so at this point, with the raindrops starting to fall, we are extremely wary of the rain, as well as these tires being very much past their prime. And so we are just trying to run smoothly without any major mistakes here, as we will head closer and closer towards our one pit stop of this race, trying to continue to set decent times and trying to hold off the bubble behind. We actually do manage to put a decent chunk of time into the group ahead. Granted, still a full 9 seconds ahead of us, but nonetheless, every little bit matters and every little bit counts on our effort here to solidify ourselves in the top 10 rather. And we will come in for our pit stop here on lap 12, beginning of lap 13. Going on to the hard tires that we will be attempting to finish the race on, and we are definitely looking better than not as we make our pit stop optimal. Hopefully it goes smoothly. Thankfully it does, and we end up coming out in the same position as when we left, at least in terms of net positions. We actually didn't even lose that many positions behind regardless, as we come out of the pits and actually find ourselves only in P12, net about the same, I would say about P6 net, as those ahead of us still have to make their pit stop. But we are seeing the dangers here of a colder damp Suzuka circuit on these fresh hard tires. As we move forward here a couple of laps, we regain some positions thanks to the pit stops, but the Mercedes of George Russell is really dangerous there. We actually end up getting back up into P6. We knew as they were coming out of the pits on the hards, it was going to be extremely important to get by them and really try and put some distance before their hard tires have time to set in, as we are actually probably still working on warming up our tires. But nonetheless, the AI is much better at warming up tires than I am, and we really needed to get past them and have any opportunity to solidify ourselves here in the top 10. Thankfully, we opened up about a second gap between us and George Russell, and we're hoping that Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari will provide a bit of an adversary for George to occupy his mind a little bit as we continue to move forward, now marching back at that 10-second gap to the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo ahead of us, who is currently running in P5. So, we love to see that for Daniel, but that 10.5-second gap ahead is definitely something we would like to avoid going forward. But nonetheless, we are, just crossed the midway point in this one, and we are feeling pretty good, running a solid P6 here, making some fantastic moves, in my opinion, at the beginning of the race. And at this point, it's all about minimizing mistakes and trying to run a nice, clean, smooth race, as we actually find ourselves losing a bit of time behind to George Russell, and we're starting to have to think about it a little bit more than we would like, trying to keep him out of DRS range as much as possible, especially on these hard tires, while also understanding that these tires need to get us to the end, which is definitely something for us that we have a lot to work on in terms of being smooth and not having to worry about tire degradation too much down the backstretch of the race. As we move forward here to lap 16, the rain continuing to fall, but nonetheless, we continuing to check in with our engineer on the weather updates. He continues to tell us that it's dry enough for slicks, and being the fastest tire, so we will trust him on this one. But it has been sprinkling on the camera for more than a few laps now, and so we're really starting to wonder if and when it will be time for the change to the wet tires, or the inters rather, in this one, as it would seem. But nonetheless, the hard tires seem to still be the move, as we're trying to hold on to that 1 second buffer behind, keeping George Russell at arm's length out of DRS range. But that Mercedes definitely much better in these medium speed corners than our car, especially with us at the wheel, just trying to not to make any major mistakes. But nonetheless, we find ourselves here as we once again check in on the weather. It definitely seems like it's just going to be light rain for a majority of the time left here, but nonetheless, dry tires are the move. And now this one, we deploy a very successful strategy that we will employ a lot here, especially as we continue to run as we get a little squirrely out of the hairpin. Unfortunately, that will do it for us for George. We tried to implement this strategy as we get distracted by Carlos behind and make a huge mistake as we fall to P8, as we run wide, very wide, and allow the opportunity for the double overtake on us. And so we are feeling the effects of some poor decisions and some big mistakes, but we have to continue moving forward. We can't get too bogged down with it, as Valtteri Bottas finds himself on our rear bumper as well. We are deploying ERS in a defensive manner, trying to hold him off as best we can, trying not to lose 3 positions in one sector here around Suzuka. So this has definitely turned a little bit from bad almost to worse in this, just in almost a full single sector here in Japan. That just really just goes to show how fine the margins are for us, especially when we're running well outside where our car probably should be performing. And now as we move forward here to lap 20, we find ourselves with the other Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton behind us. And this is definitely not where we wanted to be, in a light rain on hard tires in a car that is very, very tricky to maneuver, at least so far this season. And so we are definitely doing everything we can to put in some decent lap times and hoping that we can hold off the 7-time world drivers champion, while trying not to get too far outside of the possibility of George and Carlos fighting ahead of us. That could potentially afford us an opportunity to kind of get back up into the position that we lost due to the mistakes we made earlier. But unless, as we come home to finish lap 20, we have the clear goal in sight of solidifying a top 10 finish here. And really, as long as we don't make any major mistakes, I think we'll be able to accomplish that goal. And we will be able to move forward, once again getting a little bit of points, which for us is absolutely the way we need to go as we continue to move forward on this first young season for us. And so we are feeling pretty decent. We continue to wait on this rain to kind of get heavier to really make a change or force a change. But nonetheless, if the raindrops continue to fall on the camera, but we are continually told that slicks are the right move. And so we will continue to move forward as best we can, trying to be as smooth as possible to try not to wear out our hard tires any more than we have to. Once again, that sharp right-hander, we just run extremely wide into the gravel pit, and we are absolutely kicking ourselves at losing that position to Lewis. And we now find ourselves in P9, now chasing the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, where once again we make a big mistake when we could ill afford to. And that's really just the story of this one. We find ourselves running in P6 for a majority of the race, but it really just comes down to these last few laps where, things just start not to go the way we want. And big mistakes cost us absolutely huge amounts of time. And now we're looking at that 2-second gap behind us to Valtteri Bottas for that P10 position. And he is absolutely going to be trying to make a run at us, especially considering we've made some pretty key and major mistakes here these last few laps to really surrender a lot of positions fairly easily. And so from here on out, we really need to focus up and really need to concentrate on just running our race, not getting too bogged down. And as easy as it is to say, not getting too discouraged with the fact that those major mistakes are going to cost us more than a few points here, as we actually start to see a bit of standing water on this last lap here as we are fighting Valtteri Bottas, as Lando Norris in the McLaren comes home to win the Japanese Grand Prix. Wow, what a result for the McLaren team. I believe Ricciardo has also been running at least in the top 6. Up here, at least was the top 5 before when we were running in P6. So the fantastic day for McLaren, as we are hoping and praying. Now we have plenty of ERS to use here down these last few corners, so we're not worrying about it too much as we take these last couple of chicane corners nice and smoothly on this ever-growing, ever-damp track, and we will come home to finish in P9. Not quite where we were expecting, not quite where we had the opportunity, but in the points, nonetheless, a solid result for us as we continue to learn and grow as a team and as driver on this game and in this season, as Fernando Alonso comes home to win driver of the day. We definitely feel okay that we finished in the points once again, especially after last time out around Singapore, where we very much struggled a lot more than we did here. And as much as we had the struggles here this weekend, we definitely are okay with a couple of points onto our name, onto our team, trying to do our best to continue to fight for every single point that we can get. And considering it's our first season here in this F1 alternate universe, we will take every single one we can get, especially as we make the final push down the back end of the season. So as we head to the podium, a celebration here for Lando Norris. I believe this is his first win here in our little alternate F1 universe, joined on stage by Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. Definitely a solid win for the McLaren team and a solid win for the young McLaren driver, the Brit, getting his, I believe, first win of his career at this point, I believe, if my memory is serving correctly. I think he's been on the podium at least once other time this season, but getting his maiden win here is a big one, especially for him in his championship hopes. So we come home and finish P9, losing a couple positions off the start of the race. A bit unfortunate. Oscar Piastri once again loses his own position and finishes P21. We definitely need to start seeing more from him as we get closer and closer to the end of this race. So as we look forward to the standings, we actually fall to Daniel Ricciardo, who ended up 5th. And so we are now down to 11th in the driver standings, and a lot of ground to make up for sure. Moving over to the constructors standings. Oh, God. Apologies. Moving over to the constructor standings, we still hold on to P7 in the constructors. So a long way to go. But for now, that'll do it for me this one. I'll see you in the next one.